The story starts with Rain Shroud getting called out by his party members. Arios tells Rain he is fired from the party, shocking Rain. Rain asks for the reason, and Lian harshly says it was done because he is useless. The other members start mocking him, and when he tries to talk, Arios tells him he shouldn't since it'll be pathetic. So, Rain leaves the party along with returning the gear that was given to him. Rain starts thinking about what he should do now in the city of Horizon. While he was still thinking, some children came to him and asked whether he had completed the job or not. Then they ask him to do the usual thing, and Rain happily accepts. Rain sees an eagle flying and makes a temporary contract with it. He orders the eagle to say hello to the children, which makes the children very happy, and he decides to let the eagle go. The children tell Rain they'll become a beast tamer just like him rather than being a hero. When Rain inquires about this, they say the other party members and Arios are always annoyed by them, but Rain is different and always plays with them. At this, he remembers how the people were annoyed whenever he talked about the hero party. Thinking for a while, he decides to become an adventurer. At the Adventurers Guild, Rain gives his name for registration as an adventurer. He asks the guild receptionist, Natalie Broff, to tell him about the adventurer's system. She gives him the essential knowledge and asks his class. Upon hearing Beast Tamer as his class, she becomes anxious, which makes Rain remember what Lian had told him before, but Rain says he'll be fine. He was then told to kill 10 goblins as a registration test. Using a squirrel, he tracked the goblins and started to attack them. He kills them off and collects the magic stones. He then hears someone scream only to find a girl who has been cornered by a killer tiger. He decides to use his knife to attack it, but its skin is so thick that his knife breaks apart. As the killer tiger corners him, he witnessed the girl jumping at a very high speed and defeating the tiger with a single blow. Rain sees that the girl is from the cat tribe, said to be an endangered species. The girl falls, and Rain asks whether she is okay or not. She says she is hungry. After Rain gives her some food, she thanks him and introduces herself as Kanade. While they start talking about themselves, Rain tells her about his banishment from the heroes party, which makes Kanade angry with the hero. This made Rain happy as she was angry for him, and he patted her on her head, and she happily enjoyed it. She then asks Rain to tame her. At first, Rain wonders if it is possible to do so but feels that he wants to know Kanade better and try it, which turns out to be a success. Kanade and Rain are shown searching for herbs to collect for the guild registration process. Rain decides to use a rabbit and makes a temporary contract with it, much to Kanade's surprise. He has the rabbit bring its friends and makes temporary contracts with all of them, which only shocks Kanade further. As she believed that beast tamers could only tame one animal at a time and as he had already made a contract with her, he should have already reached his limit. But Rain says it is normal for most beast tamers, however Kanade loudly interjects that it should be impossible. At the Adventurers Guild, Rain submits the items that he gained from his quest to the guild receptionist Natalie, who informs him that he's passed his adventurer's trial. With that, he's now recognized as an F-ranked adventurer, and he's given 50 copper coins for completing the quest. Natalie also states that although the payout is paltry, once Rain completes more quests, he will rank up and earn more money for his troubles. With ranking up in mind, Rain notes that he'll need lodging and to achieve this, would need to earn more money. Later, Rain meets with Kanade in the cafeteria, where he informs her that he's an official adventurer now and asks if she'd like to accept a quest. As Kanade happily accepts, a man approaches the two and takes an immediate interest in Kanade because she is a cat spirit. When the man tries to court Kanade, she refuses, claiming that she belongs to Rain because he's her tamer. Finding it hard to believe, as cat spirits is one of the ultimate species, the man challenges Rain to an arm wrestling contest with Kanade as the prize. Despite his hesitancy, Rain accepts the challenge and instantly wins, much to his surprise. Just then, Natalie arrives and after observing the situation, apologizes to Rain and notes that the guild was aware of the man's antics and was considering suspending his license. Taking care of the man, Natalie formally apologizes on behalf of the guild. However, her inner voice leaks out when she asks Rain how he managed to tame Kanade. This makes both Rain and Kanade shudder in fear, and Natalie regains her composure and takes away the man. After Natalie left, Rain wondered how he became so strong, and Kanade explains that it was because he made a contract with her. As a result, his strength was amplified in return. Excited to take on a new job, Kanade's hopes are extinguished when they do herb gathering again. Kanade complains that they should be doing a more extravagant job. However, Rain explains that because he is F-rank, they're only allowed to complete basic jobs. Although psyched to do her best so they could gain more experience and rank up, Rain forms a temporary contract with some horned rabbits once again to collect their quota of herbs. As despondent over this as Kanade was, she hears screaming off in the distance, and Rain suggests they check it out. At the location, An old man and his mule are surrounded by a group of bandits known as the Ebon Fangs. Hiding behind a nearby bush, Kanade informs Rain of the Ebon Fang's infamous reputation as a brigade of bandits with 100 members to their rankings. Although Kanade believes they should fall back and get help, Rain refuses and thinks they should take the bandits on themselves. Understanding her master's gumption, Kanade is told to rescue the old man while Rain deals with the bandits. The two then ambush the bandits, and as Rain deals with the bandits, Kanade checks on the old man while her inner monologue notes her concerns that Rain may not be able to handle his newfound strength. However, as Kanade observes Rain fighting against the bandits, her heart starts to race, and when he finishes, Rain notices that Kanade's face is reddish and asks if she was hurt. Kanade, however, denies the fact, and the old man speaks out to thank the two for their help. The old man then explains that a group of adventurers were hired to protect him, however, they fled when the bandits arrived, and he voices his concern over retribution from the Ebon Fangs. Briefly contemplating over it, Rain decides to deal with the rest of the Ebon Fangs. En route to their destination, Rain temporarily contracts some animals around the surrounding area to scout out the Ebon Fangs. He also explains to Kanade his reason for wanting to deal with the remaining Ebony Fangs members and assures her that he has a plan to do so. As astonished as Kanade was, she's ordered to return to the town and get some reinforcements while he has the Arbies handle the Ebony Fang members. Although Kanade felt dejected again by her value as Rain's familiar, she snaps out of her emotional state and learns the need for reinforcements. The reinforcements that Rain wanted were called the Order of Knights, a group tasked by the government to uphold peace in the lands. Understanding her task, Kanade leaves, and a swarm of Arbies arrives, and Rain forms a temporary contract with them all. Elsewhere, two of the three adventurers who were tasked with protecting the old man earlier before, are revealed to have been Rain's old comrades, Mina and Liane. The two curse their situation and how Arios and Agath were sucking it up with the nobility while they decided to take on jobs as adventurers. They then redirect their frustrations to the beast tamer they were partnered with, blaming their situation on his inadequacy as a beast tamer. However, in his defense, the beast tamer claims that the demands of the two were far too complex for him to accomplish. He also claims that their notion that a beast tamer can tame over 20 animals is impossible, which Liane considers to be a lie and holds the beast tamer responsible for their failure. The beast tamer flees after being threatened by Liane to take responsibility for their failure. She internally refuses to believe that Rain is any higher than the garbage she thought him to be. Returning to Rain's side, his Arbies deal with the remaining Ebony Fangs members and Kanade arrives with reinforcements. As the reinforcements handle the paralyzed bandits, Rain notices that only adventurers are there and not a single member of the Knights of Order. One of the reinforcements reveals that the Knights of Order had no time to deal with a bunch of cutpurses. At that moment, a trio of Berserk King Lizards break through their wooden cage and attack the Ebon Fang members and then Rain. Through the combined efforts of Rain and Kanade, they manage to take down the monsters, allowing the adventurers to carry the Ebony Fang members out of the area. Eventually, Rain and Kanade exit the Ebony Fang's base with Kanade holding onto the King Lizard's magical stones. Although Kanade was elated that they have actual beds to sleep on, Rain was flabbergasted that they have to share a room together thanks to the innkeeper. Rain's narration explains how after they turned in the bounty on the Ebony Fangs, they were recalled to the Adventurers Guild. There, Natalie informs Rain he's been promoted from F rank to E rank, and they were given a sizable reward for their efforts. With their rewards, they purchased new equipment, celebrated by having a fancy dinner together, and finally ended up in their current predicament. Despite his apprehension, Rain agrees to share the room with Kanade for the night, and as Rain sleeps, she contemplates how fortunate she is to have been found by Rain. A week passes since Rain first met with Kanade, and in Rain's inner monologue, he explains his enjoyment of the laid-back adventuring lifestyle he and Kanade have been living thus far. From the Adventurers Guild, they learn from Natalie that a hooligan has taken refuge at Stride Bridge and picks fights with anyone who tries to cross the bridge. Enticed by the 5 gold rewards, Rain accepts the quest and immediately heads to the bridge with Kanade. Shortly after they arrive, a red dragon flies overhead, lands close to the two, transforms into a female humanoid, and proclaims its desire to fight them. Surprised that the red dragon is really a woman, Rain asks if she's the noted guard dog of the bridge, which she confirms and introduces herself as Tanya, a dragonoid. Apparently, Tanya was using the bridge as a training ground for training, and Kanade explains to Rain that it's a form of pilgrimage to dragonoids, and Tanya confirms it. Tanya then openly challenges the two to a match, and both Rain and Kanade agree to her challenge. The battle starts with Tanya throwing a punch at Rain, who barely defends against it. Impressed by this feat, Tanya then breathes fire at the two, setting Kanade's tail on fire. Because of this, Kanade fights against Tanya, and Rain watches in amazement at how Kanade can fight against Tanya on equal footing. To help Kanade, Rain tries to attack Tanya, but she catches Rain as he soars in the air, grabs Kanade, and throws them into the air while preparing to breathe fire at them again. However, they manage to dodge the attack by working together, earning Tanya's praise. Noting the difficulty of facing off against Tanya and how he needs to fight like a beast tamer, Rain asks Kanade to buy him 3 minutes to prepare. Without hesitation, Kanade agrees to help and faces off against Tanya as Rain forms a temporary contract with a bird and asks it to call for reinforcements. After this, Rain takes over, and with the birds he contracted, they attack Tanya, who becomes immobilized after they attack her. Rain then reveals that the birds are called Pito, and their plumage is poisonous. Tanya surrenders, incapable of fighting further, and Rain asks her to come with them. Questioning what would happen if she refused, Rain answers that he doesn't know but comments on what a fix he'd be in if Tanya doesn't comply. Amused by the response, Kanade pokes Tanya into submission, making her agree to the demand. Afterward, Rain and Kanade report back to Natalie at the Adventurers Guild, and before Tanya can introduce herself, Rain stops her, and abruptly leave the guild in a hurry. Outside, Tanya draws attention to herself, and both Rain and Keed stop her from revealing she's a dragonoid. On the outskirts of town, Tanya is disciplined by Rain, who allows her to leave, but admonishes her from starting any trouble again after this. However, Tanya, who had taken a liking to Rain, suggests that he tame her as well, to which he begrudgingly agrees and forms a contract with her. That night in town, Arios complains about his team's wasted efforts in the lost woods they spent trying to fight against monsters. With Leanne and the others complaining that Rain's old tasks were a burden on the group, Arios decides to recruit Rain back into the group, only to dump him again after they complete their quest. Meanwhile, as Rain sleeps on the floor, Keed and Tanya argue about which bed the other sleeps on, as one of the beds has a view of Rain as he sleeps. In a narration, Rain explains regarding slimes and his team was tasked with subjugating the monsters, which unsettles Kanade, due to their stickiness, whenever they're defeated. Tanya then boasts that she'll be able to defeat them all for her, which earns her Kanade's praise. Standing by watching the scene unfold, Rain notes how happy he was about how the two were getting along. Time passes by, and the group cannot locate a swarm of slimes. Hence, Rain uses one of his beast tamer skills on a bird called Assimilate to merge part of his soul with and control the bird to search for slimes within the area. The feat astonishes both Tanya and Kanade, and after their outburst, Rain flies off to search for slimes as the two watch over his body. Eventually, Rain locates the swarm of slimes, and before they begin the job, Tanya asks Rain if he can use any magical spells. Rain answers that he can use Fireball and Heal, which under Tanya's suggestion, casts Fireball against the slimes, eliminating every last one of them. The outcome astounds Rain and Kanade, but not Tanya, who explains that Rain's abilities have risen since making a contract with her. Just then, more slimes appear at the scene and, following Tanya's instructions, Rain learns how to control his magic better. Afterward, Tanya and Kanade talk to a little girl outside the Adventurers Guild, informing her that they successfully completed a slime subjugation quest. Rain then joins the two girls, and after a stroll through the town throughout the day, that night, the group enjoys dinner at a restaurant. Once they're finished, Rain reveals the background of his home village and how it was lost one day due to a monster attack. A group of adventurers would eventually rescue Rain, and he was relocated to an inn where he worked his keep for years until Arios' group recruited him. He joined the group without hesitation, believing it'd be for the best and would allow him to prevent the same tragedy that happened to his village. However, the group thought of him as a useless tag-along, leading to his dismissal from the heroes' party. Hearing this story saddens both Tanya and Kanade, but they note their fury against the heroes' party for how they treated Rain, but he assures them that it's all behind him. The day after, Rain's group subjugates a bunch of orcs, one of which manages to stab Rain in his arm with a knife while trying to protect Tanya. Assuring her that he's fine, Rain then uses Heal on himself that instantly heals the wound, and suggests they collect the magical ores the orc left behind and turn them into the Adventurers Guild. That afternoon, Rain does this and learns from Kanade that Tanya had wanted some time alone to herself. Tanya stood on a bridge gazing at the flowing river water below, pondering whether or not she's done the right thing, and then a little girl from the other day approached and talked to her. Tanya would have a brief heart-to-heart with the little girl that lifted her spirits. Soon, Rain finds Tanya, who formally apologizes to him for her actions earlier that day. On the other hand, Rain notes his relief for being able to find Tanya, and that night, Tanya realizes her feelings for Rain, but would flatly deny them as a fondness for him. The following day, after another successful quest was completed, Tanya suggests to Rain that they purchase new equipment, and Rain liked the idea. Before they're able to progress any further, Arios and his party confront Rain on the road and give him a sarcastic greeting. While walking down a road and reflecting on his current lifestyle with Tanya and Kanade, Rain and company are confronted by Arios and his group. Arios gives a sarcastic greeting to them, and Rain immediately suggests they take a different route. Arios speaks some disparaging remarks, so Kanade and Tanya step in to defend their master. Tanya then questions Ario's group's identity as that of the hero party. Disliking Tanya's tone, Arios tries to rebuke her, but realizes that she and Kanade are, respectively, a dragonoid and cat spirit who are two of the ultimate species. With Ario's party learning that they had been tamed by Rain, he then asks what business they have with him, and Arios claims that due to the difficulty of the Lost Woods, they had to withdraw from it. Hence, Arios offers an olive branch to Rain, allowing him to rejoin his group despite his uselessness. Agath, Leanne and Mina then all comment that Rain should be grateful for them allowing him to rejoin their group. However, Rain refuses their offer, but Mina tries to convince him, claiming a relic called the Shield of Truth located in the forest would give them a fighting chance against the Demon King. Furthermore, Leanne mentions that monsters would swarm and attack settlements without that relic, which triggers memories of Rain's past. Under pressure, Rain quietly agrees to it, and Ario's group chastises him for not accepting it from the start. As Ario's group starts to walk off, both Kanade and Tanya stop the hero's party and demand that they properly apologize to Rain by groveling. The suggestion shocks the hero party, and Tanya threatens to incinerate them with her breath if they don't voice their disdain at it. Grabbing Rain by the cuff of his collar, Arios demands that he keep his pets on a shorter leash, which upsets Rain. However, Arios insists on it and tries to make him confess that they're not his pets, but insinuates they're nothing more than his playthings, causing Rain to punch Arios. With that, Arios challenges Rain and his tamed monsters to a duel to see who is stronger, and Rain accepts his challenge. In separate locations, Kanade faces off against Agath, Tanya faces off against Mina and Leanne, and Rain faces off against Arios. Kanade's fight starts first, and Agath is happy that he has the chance to fight against an ultimate species such as her, and Kanade vows to beat him up and make him apologize to Rain. On the other hand, Agath has no intention of doing so, hence, Kanade starts the fight with a quick and powerful kick followed by a flurry of punches. Agath manages to defend against the attacks with his broadsword, but is quickly overwhelmed by her attacks. Kanade then comments that Agath hasn't made a single move against her, which is surprising as he's part of the hero party. The remark triggers Agath, who finally counterattacks with his special move Hellfire and Brimstone Slash. However, Kanade easily deflects the attack. Furious by this turn of events, Agath proclaims he'll fight with his full strength, and Kanade proclaims she'll fight with half of her own. The revelation shocks Agath that Kanade hadn't been using even half of her strength thus far, and she quickly ends the fight with a single kick. Although, she panics thinking that she went too far, she quickly recovers and states that he deserved it for treating Rain the way he did. Elsewhere, Tanya faces off against Leanne and Mina, who openly claim she'd prefer fighting Arios than those two because they're so weak. Tanya's remark upsets the two mages, and they cast Gravity Burst and Holy Flare. By snapping her fingers, however, Tanya dispels the attacks. Thus Leanne and Mina respectively cast Judgment Arrow and Red Crimson again. Tanya dispels the attacks with a snap of her fingers and claims she used what is called Material Canceller. Refusing to believe that they've been beaten, Mina and Leanne cast multiple spells against Tanya, however, she dispels them with Material Canceller. To finish things off, Tanya casts the epic spell Ultimate End against the two, but she reveals it to be a fake-out, causing them to pass out. On Rain's side, he faces off against Arios, who forces him back with his swift swordplay. Despite this, however, Rain only takes minor scratches from the attacks and notes how underwhelming the pressure Arios is giving off compared to Tanya. Rain then attacks Arios with a punch to the gut, which winded him, and Rain reveals that forming contracts with Kanade and Tanya granted him newfound power. Utilizing the knowledge he gathered from his observation of Arios and with the help of an Arby, Rain wins his fight against Arios. Moments later, Tanya and Kanade rush to Rain's side and happily embrace him, celebrating their victory. Rain and his party arrive in the dark and dreary Lost Woods, where the Shield of Truth is said to be located at. A flashback reveals that after Arios' group was defeated by Rain's, they apologize for their misbehavior. Tanya also intimidates them into making their apologies sound more sincere, and Rain accepts their apology. With that out of the way, Arios explains the Shield of Truth's current situation within a monster's hands in the Lost Woods. Despite Kanade's and Tanya's rebukes of how Arios' tone of voice sounded as if he was still acting pompously, Rain nonetheless agrees to accept the task. In the present, Rain assures his two companions of the importance of finding the Shield of Truth for Arios' group. To start their search, Rain assimilates with a bird via a temporary contract to scope out the area, leaving Kanade and Tanya in charge of looking after his body. Immediately, Rain locates a pathway leading to their goal, but when they follow it, they get lost despite taking the correct path. Tanya casts Material Search to investigate the surrounding area and leads them to a tree emitting illusionary magic, where Tanya asks Kanade to knock it down. Before Kanade can, a disembodied voice demands they leave that place, and from the tree, a fairy appears before them. Although Rain tries to introduce himself and state his group's intention, the fairy refuses to listen and warns them that she'll expel them from the forest if they don't leave. Heeding this warning, Rain, Kanade, and Tanya flee back into the woods to discuss their encounter with the fairy. Kanade recalls that a monster inhabits the tree, and Tanya suggests they still break down the tree to remove its illusionary barrier. However, Rain insists he visit and talk with the fairy alone. Approaching the fairy again, Rain tries to start a conversation with her, who threatens to hurt him if he doesn't leave. On the other hand, Rain accepts the threat as he's confident in his ability to negotiate with beasts. As he said, Rain takes and is hurt by the fairy's illusion arrows, perplexing her as Rain's actions contradict how she's known humans to act. Rain admits he's human, but not all of them are the same, but the fairy sends off a second barrage of illusion arrows only for Kanade and Tanya to protect Rain. Both of them then try and reason with the fairy, but get into an argument midway concerning how Kanade's initial approach. Intrigued by the group, the fairy drops her hostility towards the group. Asking for Rain's name, Rain reveals it to the fairy, who in turn introduces herself as Sora and agrees to listen to their plea. From their conversation with Sora, it's learned that the barrier blocks the entryway to the fairy village and that her people protect the Shield of Truth. Learning the Shield of Truth was needed to defeat the Demon King, Sora fetches and gives it to Rain. Despite Rain's offer to help her in return, Sora flatly rejects it, noting she was merely following the ancient pact between the fairies and the original hero. Once that was done, Kanade and Tanya tried and leave, but Rain returned to Sora and asked what was bothering her. Hesitant to answer, Sora is coaxed by Rain, Kanade, and Tanya to talk about her twin sister Runa and their job to protect and maintain the barriers that lead into the fairy village. All was well between the two until they exited the barrier for personal reasons and encountered a monster affiliated with the Demon King army. Rain then details that the monster Sora and her sister Runa encountered was called a Shadow Knight. Although weaker than an ultimate species like them, it has tricky characteristics, like magical nullification, meaning only physical attacks can harm it. Sora confirms it and continues her story where the Shadow Knight demanded that she lower the barrier, but in fear, she fled and was told by the leader to abandon Runa. Hearing Sora's plea, Rain vows to help and rescue Runa from the Shadow Knight, causing Sora to embrace Rain tearfully. A flashback reveals Sora detailing the condition of Runa's release given by the Shadow Knight, by lowering the barrier over the fairy village, by sundown. Privy to this information, Rain's group heads to the Shadow Knight's location, but refuses to allow Sora to tag along as it'd break her deal with the monster. Reaching the Shadow Knight's location, Rain's group finds it sitting on a throne with Runa, and immediately, Rain casts a fireball against it as a feint. It allows Kanade and Rain to land a few blows against the Shadow Knight, who realizes that Sora sent Rain's group and then attacks Runa. However, Tanya protects, releases her from her captivity, and flees the scene carrying her away. After forming a temporary contract with some Arby's to act as a distraction, Rain casts Boost on Kanade, who utilizes her boosted power to defeat the Shadow Knight with a single blow. After Rain's explanation of the boost spell to Kanade, Tanya returns to them, still carrying Runa in her arms. Tanya also notes her surprise about how Rain knew a powerful lost skill, but he claims everyone in his village was privy to it. As Runa awakens, Rain informs her that Sora had asked them to rescue her, making Runa feel relieved. Afterward, Runa embraces Sora, and the two thank Rain's group for their actions. A brief scene concerning Runa's crude thoughts about Rain and Sora's reprimanding of her sister occurs, causing Rain to realize that they are polar opposites. Although Kanade had hoped Sora and Runa would return to their village, Sora notes that since Runa had been abandoned by their own people, she wants to distance herself from there. Having no place to go or adequate knowledge of the outside world, Kanade invites the fairies to join them. Rain allows it and forms a contract with the two. Later that day, Rain meets the heroes' party so he could finish the quest to find and give to them the Shield of Truth, while his party secretly watches. However, Arios is shocked at how it took Rain's group 2 days to retrieve the shield and yet his own group spent 2 weeks with no success. With Arios refusing to acknowledge the Shield of Truth was real, Rain suggests his group examine its authenticity. Mina casts appraisal on it and reveal that it is the genuine article, which shocks everyone in her party, and Arios notices the 2 new faces in Rain's party. Not wanting to create a scene that 2 fairies are in a human settlement, Rain demands his quest reward and is given his reward, 20 gold coins. Before Rain could once again sever ties with the heroes' party, Agath stops him and asks if he'd be interested in rejoining the party. Despite Arios' agitation over the offer, Agath came to realize that the team's inadequacy was due to them being without Rain's support. Mina and Leanne both reluctantly agree with Agatha's suggestion and asks if Rain would accept his offer. However, Rain refuses, as he's content with his current life. Once Rain had left, Agath, Mina, and Leanne all show their disdain for Rain refusing their offer, but Arios, who is still embittered by his defeat against Rain, has him agitated, who he vows to eliminate. Elsewhere, underneath a tree, Rain explains to his party about the legend of the first hero who defeated the Demon King. Apparently, only one with blood of the gods can be the hero and have unrestrained potential called Limit Break to be capable of defeating the Demon King. Arios is fairly weak compared to Rain, and Sora notes that he could be the real hero, going on to explain his accomplishments by taming everyone in his party. Kanade then suggests that Rain should tame more of the ultimate species, which would grant him enough power to defeat the Demon King, and Tanya concurs. On the other hand, Rain declines, noting the responsibilities and how he's only managed to achieve everything thus far thanks to their support. Although, Rain doesn't completely dismiss the idea, as it's far too early to decide on such an endeavor. The others' understanding of Rain tell him to take his time to decide what he wants to do, while Kanade assures Rain that they will always be by his side. One bright and sunny morning, Rain awakens on the floor of his room and hopes a free room becomes available soon as his party sleeps on the beds. Enjoying breakfast outside, Rain and his party discuss purchasing equipment for him for the journeys ahead, and Rain agrees with it. While walking down the streets of the town, Runa and Sora are alert of the people figuring out that they're fairies. This changes after Rain assures them that they'll be fine and after witnessing the interactions between Kanade and Tanya with some familiar faces. However, when a few children approach them, the girl from the group notes that Runa and Sora are Rain's new wives, which irk Sora. Also, Runa nearly reveals she's a fairy by casting magic, only to be stopped by Rain and Sora. Afterward, the group heads to a weapons store and is greeted by its rough and gruff dwarven owner Gantz, who suggests they pick out a weapon of their choosing. Rain checks out a dagger and notes the odd feeling it projects. A male customer enters the store wanting the store's best sword, and Gantz picks one out for the customer who purchases it. Once the customer left, Rain confronted Gantz about how all his weapons were of poor quality, and the owner confirmed it. Runa and Sora then belittle Gantz as a petty swindler, but he stands up for himself and shows them his best weapons for sale. When asked why he sold his last customer a paltry weapon, Gantz claims it was a test of gumption with weaponry. Furthermore, Gantz explains that most customers waste swords and toss them away when a newer model is released, which would damage his blacksmith spirit. Tanya then has a reciprocating moment with Gantz about their mutual ideals. Once that was settled, Gantz asked how Rain knew his weapons were different. Rain then details his experience as a beast tamer, which relied on astute observation of animals, and would unconsciously observe his surroundings. Impressed by Rain's explanation, Gantz agrees to make a custom weapon for him. However, he reveals that he lacks the materials to do it. Eventually, the group head to the Adventurers Guild, where a large group of adventurers are shown crowding around the bulletin board. Natalie informs them that Arios was in Horizon, seeking to recruit new support members. The news doesn't hamper Rain's mood, and he introduces Runa and Sora to Natalie. Runa alludes to Natalie that her relationship with Rain is deeper than a natural one, shocks her, making Rain disconcerted and trying to explain things properly. Progressing things, Rain submits a formal quest from Gantz requesting mithril ore. A flashback reveals that the ore may be located in a depleted mine Gantz inherited from his family. Getting assured and pepeed by his team, Rain agrees to search Gantz's mine for the ore, and the two formally introduce themselves to each other. When inquired about how much gold he'd like to receive for the quest, Rain requests a new weapon to be made instead, which elates Gantz. En route to their destination, Runa and Sora become exhausted by the long trek because of their lack of stamina. Hence, Rain locates a nearby lake, allowing his teammates to take a refreshing bath there. He also temp contracts a couple of squirrels to watch the ladies and notify him if any trouble arises. However, as Rain is taking a rest, he hears Kanade scream, rushes to their location, and learns a fish had bitten Kanade's tail. Rain realizes that he had accidentally seen the girls naked, causing them to scream in embarrassment. The situation causes Sora to become perturbed, and Rain is shown to be extremely remorseful for his actions. However, he's forgiven by Tanya and Kanade, who brush it off. They know Rain would never lustfully gaze at them. Though they jokingly suggest reversing their roles, so that they can see him naked to even the score, which he turns down. Upon reaching their destination, Rain suggests they stand to watch close by to the mine's entrance to see if his theory of thieves stealing from the mine is true. A hawk starts circling above them and shrieks, causing them to panic, and a couple of thieves exit the mine demanding that whoever is out there to show themselves. Left with no choice but to fight, Rain suggests they beat them and question them after. However, Tanya and Kanade knock the two men unconscious. Hence, Sora and Runa use their magic to peer into the thieves' minds to figure out their motives. They learn that Rain's theory was true and that the thieves are associated with 5 other adventurers within the mine. Afterwards, Sora and Runa request a head pat from Rain due to them learning from Kanade and Tanya that his head pats are second to none. The twins enjoy Rain's head pats, while Kanade and Tanya are left envious and jealous of the situation. Rain reveals that he suspects that one of the adventurers was a beast tamer from the hawk he spotted was acting as a lookout. Inside the mithril mines, the thieves inside are alerted by their comrades' defeat by the group's beast tamer, who vows to avenge them. Walking through a tunnelway within the cave, Rain's party is then ambushed by 4 adventurers who are quickly dealt with: Runa, Sora, Tanya, and Kanade. With only the beast tamer left, Rain faces off against him and his B-ranked monster behemoth. Despite being a difficult monster to tame, the beast tamer boasted that he raised it from its childhood, which circumvented the prerequisites of taming it. Rain's fight against the behemoth causes the mine to shake and crumble, hence Kanade and the others take the captured thieves outside for their safety. However, Kanade returns inside the cave to assist Rain by capturing the beast tamer as he handles the behemoth. Although Kanade restrains the beast tamer, he refuses to surrender and has his behemoth continue his rampage. So, Rain overwrites the behemoth's contract, and which causes its original owner to provoke it, forcing Rain to reluctantly cast a fireball to defeat it. Outside the mine, it is revealed that the thieves were out for revenge against Gantz for selling them inferior weapons. This is later relayed to Gantz, who feels remorseful about his judgmental attitude toward the customers he had deemed unworthy of his finer craft. Gantz claims his actions make him a failure as a craftsman, and Rain agrees, but asks that he make amends by pouring his soul into weapon making again. Moved by Rain's words, Gantz promises to deal honestly with his customers and weapons again. To start his new endeavor, Gantz asks what kind of weapon Rain wants, and he answers he'd like a new dagger and gauntlet. Meanwhile, Arios with Mina close by reject an applicant for the beast tamer job they posted, citing his inadequacy in skill for taming an ultimate species. As Arios laments over another failed applicant, Mina internally reflects on how Arios failed another worthy applicant because they didn't match Rain's caliber. Worried that their stalling hinders their responsibility for defeating the Demon King, Mina asks Arios if he'd amend the criteria for the job post. Mina's suggestion gets an apprehensive response from Arios, so she backtracks it, noting her holy vow to God to follow the hero, and leaves it at that. Alone, Arios pulls a cursed ring from his desk and plans to use it to get revenge against Rain. The following day, Rain visits the Adventurers Guild and learns the Ore Thieves' fate from Natalie, which disheartens him. Exiting the guild, Rain details the news to Runa and Sora, who console the dispirited Rain. Thankful for their kind words, Rain suggests they take a walk before returning home, and they happily agree. Walking down the town street, Rain purchases hot dogs for them all, and Runa and Sora enjoy them. After they're done eating, Runa and Sora ask Rain if it obtained any special skills or abilities by forming a contract with them. However, Rain was uncertain if he did or not, which disconcerts Runa and Sora, but they believe Rain could have obtained ultimate magic, which is greater than advanced or epic magic. Once again though, Rain didn't know if he had obtained any new spells, causing Runa and Sora to feel even more depressed. Rain then cheers up Runa and Sora by telling them he doesn't care if they give him new skills or abilities and appreciates their company. The compliment perplexes Runa and Sora as their village once abandoned them and as of now, have yet to display any notable accomplishments since joining his party. Asking why Rain still treats them with dignity and respect, he answers that the lack of trust in his former party caused his expulsion. Hence, Rain wanted to learn from his mistakes and build trust with his new party. Pleased by Rain's answer, they decide to get more hot dogs, but are stopped by a pompous man accompanied by 2 guards who demands Runa and Sora's names. The pompous man's presence alerts the crowd, and after the fairies give their names, he proclaims he'll make them his. Although met with disdain by Runa and Sora's rejection toward him, the pompous noble only declares his love and desire for them even more. Rain then steps in and demands to know the name of the pompous noble, who introduces himself as the Lord of Horizon's son Edgar from Where. Despite the fairy twins rejecting Edgar's demand, Edgar surrounds the group with his soldiers and asks again if they will agree to his offer, which Rain once again rejects on their behalf. Hence, Edgar orders his soldiers to attack him, but Rain promptly defeats them. Backed into a corner, Edgar orders the remainder of his soldiers to hold the surrounding people as hostages. Disgusted by how Edgar views his subjects, Rain awakens his fairy magic capabilities and rescues the hostages using a multicast fireball spell on the soldiers. This forces Edgar to flee the scene in shame and has Rain's group be met with praise by the citizens. However, one lady in the crowd warns them that they should leave Horizon for their safety as a cloaked individual watches them from afar. Later at the inn, Runa and Sora relay what had happened earlier to Kanade and Tanya. It's speculated that Rain's magical control had dramatically improved by forming a contract with the twins. Their conversation then changes to Edgar's shady background involving him kidnapping and torturing women for his amusement. Edgar apparently gets away with his dirty deeds, thanks to his father's influence as Horizon's lord. While the knights have investigated the accusations against Edgar, they've sadly found no evidence of any crimes committed. After deliberating over what to do, It's ultimately decided that Rain and his party will defeat Edgar and save the city. That night, at the Fromware Manor, Edgar talks with his father, and after he excuses himself, Edgar pays his knight Gillet to take care of Rain. Once he's gone, Edgar summons a slave servant of his and proceeds to beat her for not meeting his outlandish expectations. The following day, Rain and Kanade visit the Order of Knights HQ to file a formal complaint against Edgar. However, the complaint was formally rejected as the complaint was already reported as a minor scuffle and would not be investigated further. After they leave, Rain reveals to Kanade that the knights are in cahoots with Edgar. They're then approached by the vice-captain knight named Stella, who requests their help to bring down Edgar. Trusting in Kanade's judgment about her opinion of Stella, Rain agrees to help her while also cleaning out the corruption within the Order of Knights. To catch the corrupt knights in a trap, Stella enlists help from some trusted knights in her division, and Rain gets his new gauntlet from Gantz. By nightfall, a trap is laid at a warehouse rumored to have incriminating evidence against Edgar, and thus the corrupt Knights of Order are sent to investigate. Once they enter the warehouse, the entrance is sealed off, and the knights, aside from Gillet, are knocked out. Facing off against her superior, Stella tearfully defeats Gillet in one-on-one combat. Meanwhile, at the Fromware Manor, Edgar receives news of Gillet's arrest and takes out his frustration onto his slave servant. The cloaked individual then visits him, who's revealed to be Arios Incognito. Arios explains that Rain is a beast tamer who managed to tame multiple ultimate species to Edgar. He then gives him a cursed ring, under the pretense it's a magical item that brings death to its target. A brief flashback reveals Nina past life at her small temple until she was enslaved. A couple of soldiers in front of Edgar's mansion warn Stella and her knights not to trespass any further. However, Stella announces her name and title while proclaiming they're there to conduct an inspection. Furthermore, she mentions that Gillet had been arrested under corruption charges. Since the soldiers refuse to comply with Stella's orders, Tanya and Kanade intervene, causing the two soldiers to alert their comrades they're under attack. Surrounded by numerous soldiers, Tanya and Kanade break through the main gate as Edgar watches from his room, anticipating his newly acquired ring will help him defeat Rain. Meanwhile, Rain, Runa, and Sora manage to infiltrate the mansion's basement, in hopes of rescuing the hostages there. Runa casts Material Search, planning to teleport any hostages they locate out of the mansion with their magic. However, Runa detects a large magical signature below them, believed to be the hostages, and one of the other signatures is said to be on par with Sora and her. Rain suspects that another ultimate species is held captive there and decides to have the fairies rescue the hostages while he rescues the ultimate species. Walking through the mansion alone, Rain locates where the ultimate species is, which turns out to be Nina, a demigod. Startled by Rain's presence, Nina acts apprehensive toward him as he breaks into her cell and casts a healing spell on her. Thankful for what Rain did, Nina gives her name and then embraces him. Another brief flashback is shown, revealing how Nina became conscripted by Edgar. Back in the present, Nina informs Rain of her situation, and he decides to emancipate her. Rain's plan, however, backfires at first since although the slave collar's magic is fundamentally similar to a beast tamer's magic, it's still difficult for him to break. By utilizing the power granted by his tamed friends, Rain manages to break the slave collar spell, which frees Nina. Outside, Stella, her knights, Kanade, and Tanya all continue dealing with the soldiers surrounding the area and are soon joined by Runa and Sora. The fairies inform the others that they've rescued the hostages, who are now at a safe location. Hearing this invigorates both Kanade and Tanya, who continue their onslaught against the soldiers. In his room, Edgar reassures his father that he'll handle the situation alone. In the mansion's foyer, Rain carrying Nina on his back regroups with Stella's group, who claim Rain had seduced another girl, much to his chagrin. At the same time, Edgar's father enters the foyer and is ordered by Stella to surrender. He, however, refuses and is captured by Rain's wire from his gauntlet. Immediately, Edgar appears and using the ring that Arios gave him, summons a reaper that stabs him in the chest with its scythe. Standing atop the mansion's roof, Arios gloats about Rain's supposed death and claims he'll now be able to rest easy. After Arios disappears into the night, Rain is revealed to be unharmed by the reaper's attack. Sora mentions that Rain was just hit with an instant death spell, yet it did not affect him. Hence, Runa casts a poison affliction spell on Rain, which doesn't work, and it corroborates her hypothesis that Rain is immune to status effect magic, which is the second power he received from their contract. Watching from the second-floor banister, the despondent Edgar watches the conversation between Rain and his party, while internally lamenting how an entitled noble such as him had failed. Refusing to accept the outcome, some dark ominous energy escapes from Edgar's ring that engulfs him and transforms the noble into a demon. Rain seeing this is both frightened and enraged as this caused him to remember that the monster that destroyed his village was in fact a demon. Demon leaves Edgar's mansion to target the townfolks below, and determined to stop it, Rain and his party pursue it. However, Rain has Stella and Nina avoid confrontation with the demon in favor of helping the townsfolk. Rampaging through the town, the demon is stopped by Kanade and is confronted by Rain's group. Their first efforts against the demon prove futile, and to even the odds, the demon summons monster reinforcements. Despite their efforts to defend themselves against the monsters, the demon casts a spell that destroys parts of the town, setting it on fire. In retaliation, Runa and Sora pin the demon in place with a light magic spell as Rain boosts Kanade and Tanya's powers. The two then launch a barrage of punches against the demon, followed by a light spell that flung the demon into the sky. Kanade then launches the demon to the ground with a gut punch. However, all they managed to do was blow off its left arm. It then proceeded to summon more monsters and prepared to destroy Horizon. Hence, Runa and Sora volunteered to use their magic to teleport the townsfolk to a safe location. Meanwhile, Mina informs Arios about the rampaging demon in Horizon. However, he refuses to take any action against it, as their main priority is the Demon Lord. Leanne concurs with Arios against Agath and Mina's concern about the demon situation, but ultimately concedes to Arios' logic. Unbeknownst to the group, Arios was the one responsible for the demon's appearance in hopes of getting revenge against Rain. Back in Horizon, Stella, accompanied by her knights and Nina, defeat the demon's summoned creatures. They're soon joined by Sora and Runa, who request their assistance with evacuating the townsfolk using teleportation magic. Privy to the fairies' plans, Stella and her knights leave to round up any townsfolk they can find, as Nina stays behind with Runa and Sora. Eventually, Stella and her knights gather some townsfolk who initially hesitated to use the fairies' teleportation magic. However, a few familiar faces of the fairies convince them enough to trust in the fairies. Before the second wave of people could be teleported, a pack of the monsters arrived. Returning to Rain's group, Kanade and Tanya become exhausted by fighting against the monsters, but soon get help from the town's adventurers. As that goes on, Runa deals with the newly arrived reinforcements, and Sora teleports the remaining townsfolk to safety. Feeling inadequate, Nina joins Rain's group in hopes of helping them. Both Kanade and Tanya realize that Nina could use her demigod powers to teleport Rain close enough to the demon so he could confront it. Carrying Nina on his back, Rain uses Nina's teleportation magic to confront the demon, and after casting Boost on himself, he magically restrains the demon. In doing this, Rain becomes afflicted by the demon's influence, but manages to overcome this and overwrites the control over the demon's monsters. Enraged, the demon breaks free from his restraints and tries to attack Rain, but is overwhelmed and defeated by its turncoat monsters. Once the demon was defeated, Nina became too exhausted to keep the two in the air, causing them to fall to the ground. Before they crash land, they're caught by Tanya. 3 days pass by since the demon rampaged through Horizon, and its townsfolk start rebuilding the town. Stella had since been appointed the new knight's captain. As for Gelée, his accomplices and Edgar's father were moved to the capital to receive formal punishment for their corrupt actions. Nina also learns that the people from her village were transported to another location, but she hopes to meet them again one day. As for the remaining party members, they all help with the reconstruction of Horizon. At the inn Rain's party stayed at, Nina officially becomes a part of the group. Later, at the Adventurers Guild, Rain and the group learn from Natalie and Stella that the knights are allying with the guild. From there, Natalie informs Rain that his party has officially been promoted to C rank due to his recent achievements involving Horizon. Nina is also formally introduced to Natalie, who affectionately cuddles her. Once that was settled, Rain mentioned his group was seeking advice for their housing situation, hence Natalie suggested they purchase a house. After some consideration, Rain agrees to the proposal, and they all go house hunting. All but the final house Natalie shows them matches everyone's individual requirements. However, Natalie is called out for showing the house last despite it matching their favors, to which she confesses that the house is haunted. Natalie also mentions various incidents that have occurred at the house that have dissuaded people from buying it. Therefore, Rain decides to investigate the place before deciding on purchasing it. Upon entering the living room, a disembodied voice demands to the group to get out, and a maid ghost appears before them. Taking action, Sora and Runa cast Holy Circle on it, however, it briskly dodges it. The group then comes to realize that said ghost has no means of attack, and it decides to haunt the terrified Kanade. This proves to become her undoing, as despite ghosts being immune to physical attacks, Kanade's fear allows her to transcend such a weakness. After chasing the ghost around the house, Sora and Runa cast Sacred Seal around the room to prevent any escape from astral beings. Before the ghost could possess Rain, he uses his power as a ghost tamer to stop her, a feat he learned in his childhood from a neighbor of his. At Rain's mercy, the ghost is asked by Rain to talk things over with him and his party. The ghost introduces herself as Tina and discloses a bit of her backstory. In the end, Rain decides to purchase the house. Meanwhile, the hero's party walk the streets and are met with disdain by its townsfolk. They attempt to get some supplies donated to them, however the townsfolk all reject them as the hero's party neglected to help them during the demon's rampage. Enraged by the townfolk's attitude toward them, Arios attacks a fruit seller's stall and leaves, upset that they favor Rain more than him. Back at his home, Rain returns home with Kanade and enjoys a feast for dinner. Before digging in, Rain reflects on how fortunate he is to have all met his party members as well as a flashback to his parents and looks forward to whatever comes next.